Good evening. Welcome to the program Artist and Critic. I'm Don Gray. Tonight we're in for a special treat. We have with us as our guest Richard Estes, the well-known American realist painter who has gained a great deal of attention in recent years. Richard, glad to have you with us. Thanks for coming. It seems that realism's time is upon us. Do you see an increasing realistic surge in the upcoming years? Do you think we're going to take over the world?
Well, I don't know that it's. You say that. I think it's always been that. I think realist painting is. They've been doing it for 40,000 years, really, and I don't see any reason why it should not continue.
Do you think that we were talking a little bit about the domination of the art world by the modernists and the abstractionists of many different kinds and so forth?
Yeah.
Do you think that domination is easing, will ease, and there'll be more opportunity for realist painters to?
Yeah, I don't feel that it dominates really that much. I just never, I really don't think about it, to tell you the truth. It's never.
Well, you're a very sort of inner-motivated artist. You haven't hung out with other groups of artists.
Yeah.
You're pretty much matured on your own, and you've been amazingly self-sufficient.
Mm-hmm.
How did you survive, or how did you keep? Could you describe what you went through in terms of your inner life during the years, the lean years, before you were well known?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I just was trying to do trying to discover really what I wanted to do for myself. I tried a lot of, different styles of painting, and I looked at a lot of painting, and I did a lot of painting, and I don't think I really thought too much about what was happening in the art world. I was more interested in doing what I wanted, what I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, to discover myself, really.
Did you have time to be sort of, you sound almost leisurely in your development, although there's a sense of struggle. Artists really go through terrible times trying to find themselves, which is what you're saying.
Yeah.
But
I think, I think it's really a mistake for a young artist to get too much concerned with modern art or what happens to be the latest art. I think it's much more helpful to concentrate on the older paintings, and which have sort of lived through fashion, and and concentrate on the technique, and sort of forget about the art scene. I mean, you can't. I mean, you really can't avoid it. It imposes itself upon you. You don't have to go out and really look for it. But really, the thing to do, that I did, is when I had time to do any painting, I just, I did the painting, and between since I had to work and I wanted to do the painting, I simply didn't have time to be involved in anything else.
What kind of work were you doing to support yourself?
Yeah, in the advertising.
You were in the advertising business?
In the advertising.
Good heavens, that's the rat race, isn't it? How did you survive that and combine the two careers? I didn't realize that. That to me seems
I was, I don't know. I did mostly layout sketches and things like that for advertising, and I found it good practice. At least I was using my hands and chalks or pencils or inks or whatever it was, preparing sketches, and yeah, I found it very helpful. I think I learned more in advertising than I learned in art school.
Really? Oh, there are going to be a lot of professors and art school people who are very upset over that statement. Yeah. You didn't find the repeated
I find it's a good discipline, you know, just to go in and have to produce something in 10 minutes for somebody, and not to get too hung up about the aesthetics of it, but just to if you know, to do it and get it over with, and then go on to something else. Because nothing's ever going to, you're never going to be completely satisfied with everything. There's always going to be something wrong, or you want to do it better. So, but still, it's better to just do it and then do something else.
Move on to something
and that was
else.
something I learned in advertising. So you're forced to do that in order to survive.
So you had enough money, in other words. That wasn't a factor in the early struggles of your finding yourself as an artist and developing and so forth.
Well, I had the money because I was working, but
Right.
I didn't have time. As a result of working, you don't have that much time.
So did you work late at
And
night?
I used to alternate. I'd work for a year and then quit and do painting for a year until, you know,
Till the money ran out?
until the money ran out. I'd get another job. I did a lot of freelance work. It always paid better to work on a freelance basis anyhow, and it did give you more free time. The thing I hated about jobs is to go into a job and sit there and really not do anything for 3 hours, and
You're imagining all that time could be spent painting?
and then I could have been doing some painting or something.
Right.
But just have to put in the time that you do in a job. I found that very frustrating. I'd rather be doing something.
Do you look back on those years with sort of a nostalgic, the way we were kind of look in the past, or are you just damn glad they're over with and you're where you are now with?
I'm glad
as
they're
much
over
time?
with. I
You
wouldn't
are?
want to go
Yeah,
back to
right.
that. No,
Right.
it's a horrible existence. I think working in an office, in anything, not only advertising. I feel sorry for people that scurry up into those big
buildings,
on
those
6th Avenue. And
I know. What are the problems of success, Richard? Are there any in terms of increased expectations or pressures or?
Well, not really. No, I wouldn't. I mean, there are problems, I suppose, but I can't really. I don't think it's anything.
No, well, just sometimes, one becomes very much the target of criticism, and of course, I guess you've been the target of some criticism from the pseudo-avant-gardists. let's say pseudo. I think they're the academy, really.
Right.
Yeah, they've come into power.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been in power for some time.
I don't. It hasn't bothered me. I mean, I can't say that I've lost any sleep over it. I mean, it hasn't had any effect on my career. I think that the worst thing that is from some people that you could get would be praise, actually. I mean, that would be the kiss of death.
And you become too satisfied with what you do and you cease to push it farther and farther. Would that be it? Or?
Well, yes. That's not exact. I mean well, of course, that's right. I mean, that's not exactly what I was thinking, but that's. I was thinking that that somehow it's to be accepted by everyone is not good. I mean, and that means that you'd rather
become bland or something.
I mean,
yeah, I see what you mean. I see what you mean.
It's.
Richard Estes, of course, shows with the Allen Stone Gallery in New York City, and he is a very, very penetrating realist painter of the city and images of the city. How did you happen to see the pictorial possibilities of color and shape and just the form of the buildings and storefronts and restaurants and flower shops? You've done a sensational painting of a flower, in front of a flower store. How did you see all these possibilities in this magnificent city when so many other artists were blind to these?
Well, maybe the trouble is that you don't see things unless you look at the world rather than art. In a sense, you can look at too much art and feel that art or painting has to be a certain thing, and therefore you just automatically reject the obvious, really. But that's where I'm living, you know, that's where I'm at, and why shouldn't I do where I'm at rather than where somebody else was at?
Are you trying to express anything particularly about the city other than its visual richness and the beauty of structure and shape and color? I mean, is there some statement that you're making, or I'm not trying to push you toward it, but I'm just sort of asking for everybody, perhaps.
Yeah. Not really. I think painting is a visual experience, and you can, in a painting, you can deal with the visual aspect of the city, and without the being bothered by a lot of other things. You know? I mean, you use it. It's just it separates it.
In some of your pictures, there.
I don't think there's any. I'm making any kind of social comments about the city or anything like that.
Yeah, it's either a good place or a bad place in your paintings. I mean, it's just a
or
rich
a painting doesn't.
Place.
It doesn't even have to. You know, a painting doesn't necessarily depict anything beautiful. Even the Raft of the Medusa was not a beautiful experience. I don't think.
Right.
But
it was a powerful, compelling.
It's a powerful painting.
Right. Exactly. In your pictures, there's a sense of, well, let me put it this way. I think if people, and I'm sure you probably agree, if people look at things enough, they see the significant character of things and moods. Buildings have moods, and as trees have moods, as individual people have moods, perhaps created by the relationship of shapes and colors or the forms or whatever. But many buildings in New York seem you could almost translate them into people, in a sense. Have you ever thought of that? Because sometimes your buildings have a character and a feeling of sort of, well, I don't know if I want to use the word loneliness, but they seem sort of as if they're slightly alive and have a character of, well, let me say loneliness, okay, for want of a better word.
Yeah.
Am I way off the beam when I say this, or?
Well, I don't know if that may be what you experience from the painting.
You don't feel that when you look at some of the buildings.
No, not really.
Okay.
No, I can't. I certainly don't feel anything lonely when I look at the
yeah,
buildings.
maybe I'm struggling for a word, but I don't want to link you to Hopper, because I think you're quite different from Edward Hopper. Hopper had a feeling of sort of isolation and solitary loneliness, where doorways were mouths and windows were eyes, in a sense. You know what I mean, in terms of the dark feeling of the mood as well as the placement of the shape. You're not like Hopper at all. You're a complete individual and a very interesting painter. But I'm wondering if this mood is almost intrinsic to the city, that I feel a little bit of that in Hopper, in you to a degree, and I'm not sure. Like the front of the flower shop we were talking about.
Maybe the city encourages loneliness, or the fact of so many people living together. They're forced to protect themselves by being loners. I mean, you don't tend to talk to your neighbors in New York that much. I have people living across the hallway from me. I haven't seen them in a year.
Exactly.
And people given the condition that we live in and the way that we live, you do that for your own protection.
Exactly.
Because there's so many people, you have to
be careful of.
Be careful. You just can't handle more. No human being can really handle more than about 15 or 20 people in their at one time in their lives, maybe intimately.
Yeah. It just erodes your sense of self, and they invade your own world in a sense, and break it
given,
down.
Put in an environment with so many thousands of people, you're lonely in this from self-preservation. I mean, this is just something I'm saying, you know.
But it's not a deep. It's not a deep thing.
I hadn't
connected
thought
to your
about it ever
pictures.
before.
Yeah. Okay. I don't want to lead you in a direction that isn't you, in a sense. You mentioned earlier that you were painting some of the old people of the city before you moved into the buildings, or perhaps combining them with the buildings.
Yeah.
Well, what were you expressing with those people? Well, why did you paint them?
Well, they're fascinating. I was fascinated by these old people sitting on benches in the park or along Broadway. Of course, technically, I was still into the problems of figure painting, I suppose, and they were those that would sit still long enough. They would just sit there or in cafeterias a lot. They don't have, you know, which have disappeared now. I think that But
they were. But you did you pick old people? I'm not trying to. I mean, I've been interested in old people.
Yeah.
You know, we were talking about it because not only are they the remnants of society that has sort of ground them up in the mill and fleshed them aside, which you were mentioning, but also just their whole shape. They've been used. They're like an old shoe compared to a new shoe. They've got all the creases and the gnarls and the bulges and the sags and the hunched shoulders, and their faces just have this sense of sorrow as well as the character of all the years that they've lived. Were these things what drew you toward them, or?
Well, no, not really. I mean, I agree with all that. I mean, I can see all that.
To tell you what I'm thinking,
I can see all that in
okay.
old people, you know, and you can talk about them being rejected like an old automobile, you know. You use it up and then you turn it in for a new one. Just, you know, like an old person works for a company for 40 years and then they wear them out and they reject them and they get somebody new. I mean, you can all that you can talk about, but it's not what I was thinking about when I was doing the painting. I was really thinking about simply just the pure visual form and how to make that nose come out in front of the cheek and in a positive way rather than, you know, and to get the right flesh tone and the technical, you know, to mix the color right and things like that. That's all I was thinking about. Just like doing the same problem with the buildings. I mean, you can read all this into it, but
essentially it's a painter's problem.
It's, you know, that's something that's interesting to talk about, maybe.
But
I don't think, I never thought about it. You don't think about that when you're doing painting. They're just the pure problem of making it work visually, you know, and technically to control that you deal with.
Frankly, too, I guess if you are just working with the painterly problems, if you do them well, you're going to come up with the character of your subject. And if it's an old, depressed person, it's just darn liable to be old and depressed. And if it's a youthful, springy adolescent, it's going to be that, in a sense. What is your technique now? When I know you maybe don't like to talk about it too much, but maybe we can pursue it just a second. How do you?
It's not that I don't like to talk about it. It's just that that's what everybody else wants to talk about.
That's all they talk about. Okay, well, I've attempted to lead you astray with buildings that have eyes and mouths and old people and so forth. Yeah. Okay. How do you paint? What is the process of painting? What do you do?
Well, I stretch a canvas and I size it and I take a photograph and which I look at and I make it and I draw and then I paint it. You know, in a sense,
That's it.
That's it.
Sounds pretty easy. I'm being facetious. You must work a long time on a painting. Do you? I hate to be asked this question myself, but I have to ask you again because you do work very meticulously, and it looks that you just don't give up on a form until you have it just the way you want it. So it must take a long time too.
Well, it takes about between a month and 2 months. For painting. They keep taking longer and longer too, because I used to do one in a couple of weeks.
Why is that? Do you think? What change is taking place?
Well, I don't. It's hard. I don't really know. I suppose they've gotten a lot more detailed and a little more controlled. I've looked at some of my older paintings, and maybe not that old, 5 years, 7 years ago. I mean, they tend to look a little bit crude to me.
Have you noticed that? I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Have you noticed that a number of other realists are tightening up their techniques, almost as if they're trying to, well, since modern, as I feel, and I guess you're agreeing, that modern art has really kind of collapsed the abstractionists and the formalists who were just painting stripes with paint rollers and so forth. It's almost as if the rebirth of realism, or the new realistic generation, is really trying to focus down on nature and how the forms work, almost more than ever, almost as if it's kind of a rediscovery of the world, in a sense. You know, I've just really come to notice this. More and more people are
well,
more...
it's the only thing left to do. I mean, they really carry the other approach to its logical and ultimate conclusion, and that was it, you know.
How did we get so impoverished?
There's nothing you could possibly do other than to get more realistic, really, because you can't. The possibilities, I think, have completely exhausted as far as you know, using, you know, expressionistic type techniques and things like that.
Well, reached a point where they were poking holes in canvas, or someone was shooting himself in the arm with a .22, I think, is the height of expressionism. I guess that is.
No, I'm not. I don't even think about those things. I mean, just the expressionistic type realistic painting. I really just think about realistic paintings. I mean, the technique of realism. It seems that the possibilities of expressionistic realistic painting, like, well, or the romantic realism, you might say, whether it's Rembrandt or who is a romantic, let's say, compared to Velázquez, who would be I would consider a classic painter. And we've sort of gone the romantic part as really for the past let's say 50 years they've dealt with that. Picasso, in a sense, is a romantic painter, or so is Munch, let's say, Edvard Munch, or
any of the German expressionists.
The German expressionists, Corinth, you know, almost any painter you can think of the 20th century would have to be termed a romantic painter, as opposed to a...
Well, you could say the structuralists like
it's like the Degas, not Degas, Delacroix, as compared to Ingres.
Yeah.
There are two schools that have always run through the history of art.
And chewed on each other.
And chewed on each other and sort of gone against each other. And now I think that...
you think a more classic approach is coming?
Now a more classic approach would be healthy, maybe for a few years, and then they can go back again to...
Blast off with the emotions.
Blast off with the emotions again.
Do you think society...
It depends on the personality of the artist, too, of course.
Do you think there was something in society, just the atmosphere, that created the decadence of modern art, where everything... We have 1 minute. Can you sum up the 20th century?
How can we sum up the decadence, yeah.
But do you feel that society somehow reflected the cold, impersonal art of really the pop artists and the stripe painters?
I think maybe the certain coldness in modern art is a good reflection of the certain coldness of the 50s. And look at the style of clothing.
Gray flannel suits.
Gray flannel suit, the functional painting, the functional architecture.
Just
everything
icy.
Functioning, but functioning for what purpose, you know? It's just sheer function of functioning.
Right, and no sense of content
living,
or...
you know.
Exactly. exactly. Very much sort of like the corporate societal structure in a sense, which I feel is very impersonal.
Yeah.
You know, that maybe the art, and they collect it too quite a bit.
Right.
I think.
Yeah, Chase Manhattan is a good
Symbol
collector of modern
that,
art.
yeah,
A good
of a certain
symbol.
type.
Yeah.
Richard,
Although they have one of my paintings.
oh, they do? Okay, well, let's not Chase Manhattan. At least they made one right choice anyway. We've been talking with Richard Estes, the well-known realist painter, an excellent painter, and there's one of his pictures at the Allen Stone Gallery right now, and of course you can find Richard's work in some of the local museums too, I'm sure. Does the Whitney, did they buy that flower piece? So, the realists are coming back as a significant force in American painting, and certainly Richard Estes is one of the most significant. We've enjoyed having him on Artist and Critic. I'm Don Gray. Thanks for being with us. Bye-bye.